and welcome to Work Culture Consultants Podcast, a show where I interview CEOs with proven successful work cultures and dive deep into how they achieved a healthy work environment for their people that in turn benefited their bottom line. Welcome everyone. I just wanted to introduce Cort Smith. He is the CEO of Davinci Vaporizers and Asian ProSource, and happy to have you on the podcast today.
Good to be here, Brittany. How you doing?
Oh, I'm great. This is our first podcast, and I'm super appreciative of you being on it with me because you're a big inspiration for me. So
Well, good, and we've got a beautiful Friday to carry us over with.
Yes. So I figure we'll just get right into it. One of the first questions I wanted to ask you in terms of work culture was what differentiates your companies from others?
Sure, I think that the work culture is largely driven by the owners. Whether it's a CEO or it's a small proprietorship. For us, because we've been in very much a husband-wife team, it's had a very family feel. My wife and I began business together 30 years ago, and I think the dynamics of keeping a healthy relationship, and yes, we're still married, so in the spirit of finding solutions and keeping happy, we gravitate more towards a family culture. And I think that works in a smaller company. We're all in less than 40 people. So I feel like that's about the limit of what we can do with family culture. I think if we were to exceed above 50 people, it might need a higher level of dealing with things, that the mom and pop mentality reaches its limits at that.
That's
the
true.
good is, though, I think that there's a very strong respect for how people feel and how they behave towards each other. The accountability, if somebody were to misbehave, like in a family, you'd be in trouble with dad. You might, have to sit in your room and miss dinner. We don't go to that level of things, but what I like is that there's a respect and there's a care that people are spoken to and about in a positive manner, that there is that sort of, I'm going to know you and have to love you tomorrow.
Right.
So that family feeling does drive some of the, a little better smile, a little more respect, a little softer touch.
Yes.
I think that differentiates us from perhaps the cold culture or the corporate culture. It's not just a number. So the good is it's pleasant and family oriented to be around. The bad might be that people can more easily take advantage of those courtesies.
Right.
And it's hard to be a steel boot or a hard ass if you're trying to be sort of a family culture.
Right. And I've seen that in the military before, that some people don't know how to switch on work and off work when they're close with their higher ups. So I'm sure you've dealt with that maybe sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's always in flux. When you get closer with your employees, you get a deeper sense of share and trust, and people are going to engage at a deeper level. But it also might be less pressure for them to revert back to, hey, I've got to put numbers on the board mode.
Right.
And if you disappoint your mother and father, they still love you. But when you're right, you have to switch back to, this is a company and it is open for profit. So if people don't do their jobs, the consequences, have financial ramifications. Not that the trash just gets smelly or the window didn't get cleaned.
Right.
It's bills don't get paid. So it's a gentle knife to wield.
It is.
Yeah.
And I love how you and your wife, like you said, brought the business up together, and you guys travel all around the world, especially with Asian ProSource, and you're in China or Asia a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I saw with all your travels that there's probably a lot of different work cultures that you see when you travel. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, we do business globally. I think our products are sold in 5 continents. So,
which is awesome.
We do a lot of trade shows in different places, and I've got 2 overseas offices, and it really is a different work culture in different places. My opinion would sound like, I think Europe has a better grip on respecting the joy of life. I think they drink their wine slowly. They appreciate a good meal. A sunset is part of the equation. In American culture, we tend to, we don't drink, we're going to shoot, we're going to take shots.
Right.
We're going to shotgun a beer. We're going to, grab a handle and drink straight from the bottle. And we tend to supercharge everything and make it bigger. And America has its ways of trying to pump things up on steroids. We're going to do it bigger, better, faster than anyone else. And so that brings a certain element of dynamics. And then in Asia, I'd say they're very fast paced. They understand the value of a second. So you have a billion people waiting idly for a second, I think it's like 33 years if you put all those seconds together, right?
Right.
So they tend to hustle harder, faster, longer. And because there's not all the safety networks in Asia that we have here. If you lose your job in Asia, you have to figure out how to go eat tomorrow.
Literally. And
in America, look, if you get fired, you could go to the city and you'll get food stamps or some means of way to stay alive. And so that sort of feast or famine mentality has its impacts on the society. And I think people tend to work harder in Asia because they could lose their job and there's not that net to fall back into.
Right.
It also keeps family ties stronger because if you lose your job, it's your family's going to house you and feed you. And in the States, we tend to, hey, my family's on the East Coast and I don't talk to my brother for 12 years now. And so there's less reliance on the social fabric. And I think that, that has, the good is that we're more independent. The bad is that we tend to put less value on these relations, that we let family relations slide.
Right. And there's something to be said about, like you were saying, it's hard after about 50 people to try to keep that family dynamic work culture.
Yeah.
And, my studies, I'm going to continue to try to search and how is that expandable? How is that scalable?
My mentor for this is Richard Branson. I follow him and watch him, and I think he always maintains such a good etiquette, such the gentleman, always positive, has a good ear for altruistic sort of ideas and, doing the right thing for society and company. So he's managed, I think, to kind of keep that father figure look in a business and still be able to perform, the business needs and keep the right culture.
I totally agree. He's an idol of mine.
There could be 12 people behind him making all that happen, but somehow he blesses it well from the top.
Which is a great segue to the fact that we were talking earlier about macro change and micro change and how CEOs, I feel that only big change can be made from the top. Micro change can be made from the bottom, and it might be scalable upward, but for the most part, I feel like at CEO levels, that's where the big change happens.
Yeah, I think the CEO sets the appetite for change, where if people were encouraged and they knew that the CEO would support positive changes, they're more apt to suggest these changes, identify changes, put them on the boards, try to measure them, and make that impact to company. If the CEO and the culture would be, this is going to cost us money, we're going to shut this down, this is not your title, then people are going to stop offering up the ideas.
Right.
So that the culture of that is to be nourished or quelled. And I think that's a lot of who the CEO is and how much they are looking to empower their people and to grow. Mm-hmm. It might be different for companies at different growth states as well. Small, young companies eager for change and improvements, and then established companies that play games at a different level. They might be more restrictive, not trying to welcome change.
Right, being open to change, and change management is such a hard thing for a lot of people to, from a psychology standpoint. People don't really like change. Even if it's good change, that means they have to do something different, and people like to get set in their ways, and it's hard.
Yeah, you say people, I'm thinking, oh God, that wasn't me though.
Right, some people.
I'm that guy that drives a different way home every day, just to keep it fresh.
True.
But I'd say that perhaps one of the qualities of our culture is that we are more dynamic and we are willing to look at changes. And when you're smaller, it's easier to articulate a change. You can, if I could share a story about a recent change.
Yes, I would. Please. Moving story.
It's part in credit to our culture. So a month ago, we launched a new product. And that product, we had just made a very sizable investment to build an app to support that product. And 2 weeks before the launch of the product, Apple came out and they dropped all apps that were in any relationship to anything that had the word vaporizer to it. And the intent was to cut the nicotine addiction with children, which is a great intent. But it was a very brash move, and it cut out a lot of other medical instruments and other people's let's say, adult tools that should not have been cut. And so as a company, 2 weeks before launch, we thought, wow, this investment the app is now tranched. There's a bit of a black eye coming from Apple. What do we do? And we sat around the round table, for the entire day of Friday. We got the news that morning. And by 7:30 p.m., we had enough meetings, enough conversations that our firmware programmer had confirmed that if we took the unit as we had now, that somehow we had enough buttons, we had enough computation speed, we had enough LED display that we could produce all the work of the app on the machine. And we realized we had an opportunity to pivot to say, well, thank you, Apple, for dropping our app and lumping us into a very bad crowd. But we responded with, we'll simply build the machine and don't need you, Apple. And sort of took away the importance of having an app. We thought the app would augment features and integration and engagement with our users. But as a small company, being able to pivot our technology in a day when these products take a year in development. So in one day to have a major shift, recenter energy and solutions, onto a machine and throw away 8 months of coding from an app.
Goodness.
It was, it was a big pivot, but the team, again, we communicate well, we solve problems well. We refer to it as heat in the kitchen. There's often heat in the kitchen. And I just think that because of our culture, we were able to communicate and articulate the changes and get that manifested. And 2 days later, the firmware was changed and the unit worked and we launched without the app.
It's amazing.
It's been, nothing but praises from the outside world.
And even Forbes picked up on it.
Forbes picked up and gave us kudos. That move might have flattened other companies. One of our competitors was deeply, deeply hurt. I should share a tear for them, but at the same time, I'm not crying too hard.
No.
But the fickleness of the tech world and praises to us for being able to pivot.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and it says a lot about you, letting your people be able to, giving them the freedom, the free reign to have that openness with you and the drive to make that change.
Well, in relationship to culture, that one thing I've noticed, so we would be considered an innovative tech company. We're innovating new technologies, and that CEOs of innovation companies, that if the CEO is himself involved with the innovation, those companies tend to thrive. And if you have an innovation tech company where the CEO doesn't know the tech and he's not pushing the threshold of innovation and not challenging people, those are the companies that don't come up with new stuff.
Right.
It's very hard to farm out innovation if it's not cooked organically in the kitchen of your own organization.
I like that.
It comes really slow. Case in point, right? As a child, I had a dream. One of my inventions was to make a recycling water feature for the shower so you wouldn't have to use so much water, because there was always a drought, there was always not enough water. So if we could just pump the water around and around, we'd do this. And then, I don't know, about 35 years ago, the world came up with something, an invention called a wet dry vac, which is a vacuum that you can suck water from a floor. And I thought, well, if we can plug something in the wall and we can suck water off the floor, then we have the technology to make a recycling water system.
Right.
And I thought of that, on and off in my years, endlessly, these 35 some odd years. And this year, CES, sure enough, year 2020, 35 years after the need, which company solved this problem? Kohler, right? Remember, Kohler makes the look like, wow, I'm glad a multi-mega corporate giant, somebody figured out they could recycle water and save water. Congratulations. So, wow. Part of that realization to me was deflating, because I thought if it takes super large companies with great budgets and the brightest minds in the world of water management, and it takes them 35 years to recognize an opportunity, that doesn't say a lot. Doesn't speak well for the innovation.
I see.
Of our lifestyle products. That again, when companies get big and CEOs get removed from the experience of the customer, that the rate of innovation and the degree of intensity innovation, it wanes.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Never even thought about that.
Hopefully NASA doesn't have that trouble.
Right, we'll see.
If you put the engineers up in the rocket into space, things would develop a whole lot faster.
I concur.
Yeah, when their ass is on the line and they're the ones breathing the systems and sitting in the cockpit, trust me, stuff will be better.
Quick. And
Yeah.
having background in aerospace, I can say that that's a true story.
Yeah.
You brought up a good point earlier that in terms of having a good work culture, what problem does it solve? So having a good work culture, what problem does that solve?
I think the main benefit of a healthy work culture, how it solves problems for us, is it allows a space for ideas and suggestions to be voiced and heard. And if people are intimidated or their work isn't recognized or someone's trying to steal all the thunder or the credit for some move, this would minimize people's willingness to want to offer up. Hey, I work in customer service. I notice that our software is very, inadequate. We get backed up. These things don't happen. If people are empowered and and acknowledged for that, then they're going to want to bring their brightest ideas.
Absolutely.
And it's no secret. Companies always say that our biggest, most important resources are people. So if culture is the mittens of which how we handle our people, that's how important that is.
I couldn't raise my hands any higher and say preach. I totally agree. And I guess that wraps it up. And I'm so thankful for your time and your knowledge. And thanks again for being on this podcast.
I'm thankful too, Brittany. It's an honor to be able to podcast with you. I think that your offerings and knowledge coming to the business world is needed. With them. So I wish you the best of luck.
That means a lot
for all of us.
Appreciate it. I really want to thank everyone for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. Subscribe and stay tuned for more thought-provoking content. If you'd like to check out my website, workcultureconsultant.com, feel free to leave feedback and send ideas for the show. Thanks again, and I'll talk to your faces later.